So, we all know the standard story of the history of XDefiant and how it had the prospect of launching during the perfect down period with the lull in the FPS space created by Modern Warfare 2 and the lackluster reception of that title, how the game captivated audiences, but then it didn't launch for nearly a whole year beyond that. But the story of how the development actually goes much further back, because XDefiant was actually revealed to the world on July 19th, 2021. Just over 3 years ago. So while we may think of the last year and how long that's felt, it's kind of crazy to consider that the story of XDefiant is 2 years older than that, and that's just publicly. And in that time, the game is still recognizable, but there's some interesting major changes that have been made since the original concepts. Today, I want to take some time to share some of these changes with you for those curious-minded out there that love this kind of story of the progression in game dev. So as we go along, drop your thoughts down below. What do you think is the most interesting change made out of what's discussed? Also, if you'd like to see more, drop a comment, let me know. There's minimal footage out there publicly of this sort of alpha state, but perhaps we can do a follow-up with some insight, maybe directly from developers. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I'll see what I can chase down, but drop a like if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for more XDefiant and other FPS coverage. And finally, if you'd like to support the channel a little further, you can use code ESPRESSO in the in-game shop. If you find yourself interested in any skin or anything, but never feel obligated to, that option's simply just there. Anyways, let's talk about these changes in the vision for what XDefiant would have been versus what it is today. From the very top level, XDefiant wasn't even the same game in name or theme initially. While always intended to be a hero arcade shooter that we have now with factions and abilities and such, you might remember the name was actually Tom Clancy's XDefiant, with a much heavier emphasis on the punk rock aesthetic. All the earlier marketing and key art had heavy emphasis on this grungy feel with some contrasting color pops for the visuals. Now, Tom Clancy's XDefiant was a bit more of a mouthful for sure, but why the rebrand? It's previously been reported that it's just simply to include even more source material than just outside the Tom Clancy universes, and instead shifting to the whole of Ubisoft's IP bank. That's pretty readily apparent with the game today and what we see in the future potentially, as we have games from the Tom Clancy catalog represented in XDefiant right now, of the Phantoms of Ghost Recon, Echelon of Splinter Cell, the Cleaners of The Division, and GS Commando of Rainbow Six Siege. All of that, of course, from the Tom Clancy umbrella, but you also have Libertad from Far Cry, DedSec from Watch Dogs, and the future rumored and otherwise leaked factions include things from Assassin's Creed, more Far Cry stuff, and even as strange as it sounds, things like The Crew in terms of game offering catalog. But while that may very well be the case, it also may have helped in more ways than just future IP integration. Might seem surprising given the reception today and the excitement over the last few months that led up to the launch and beyond, but the initial reveals and announcements of XDefiant were followed by almost nothing but negative reception. Didn't know Tom Clancy wrote books about clowns. This game was auto-generated by an algorithm. By putting Tom Clancy's in the name of the game, you literally shat on his grave. This is Ubisoft hitting their midlife crisis. Ubisoft is amazing in the way they can tank a game pre-release with just a trailer. We could solve the world's energy problems by harnessing the power generated from Tom Clancy spinning in his grave. That's just a handful of the over 9,000 comments on the reveal trailer from 3 years ago. A rather wild contrast in sentiment, I think, from this past year and what we've seen. So, seems like the shift away from solely just Tom Clancy's universes worked out in more ways than one, but naming and branding aside, there's quite a large number of gameplay differences publicly available that, even despite the absolute minimal footage out there of the game from this time, the stuff that is, you can pick out a dozen plus changes. So let's start out with some faction changes. Fundamentally, factions are an integral part of the XDefiant experience. At the earliest reveals of the game, it seemed like we'd only have 4 initially, as opposed to the 5 that we experienced in the beta and the launch windows of the game, now 6 with GS Commando in Season 1. But 2 of those 4 initially that we saw were somewhat different in what was brought to the table with the original concepts. The Phantoms were previously the Wolves. Initially based on the military criminal group of former Ghosts from the Ghost Recon series, the faction initially had 3 characters, Amina, Baco, and Fire. Initially included with the Wolves was the use of the shield-based abilities as a tank class, but why they were scrapped for the current iteration of the Phantoms from the Splinter Cell series, who knows? As with what is now Libertad, it would make sense why they were changed to sort of diversify a bit and not just be only Tom Clancy IP, but the Wolves went to the Phantoms, who were from Ghost Recon, so still Tom Clancy IP. Another such change was Libertad was previously called the Outcasts, which was initially based upon the Roosevelt Island quarantine survivors from the Division series, where they were the initial concept for the healer class in XDefiant. coming with characters of the Flayer, the Heretic, and the Mender, is another interesting case of that course correction, though I'd wager that one was changed so as to not double dip in not only just the Tom Clancy factions, but also from the Division, as the Cleaners were present as well in those earliest iterations. So of the 4 starting, not 5 starting that we had with the launch of XDefiant, 2 of those were different based off of early concept. Now, as for their abilities and how they affected the gameplay, they were a little bit different as well. The Wolves, or rather Phantom's, shield was almost a half circle. It's much less now here. It's something that's probably like covers 30% of a circle circumference, whereas beforehand it seemed to be almost a half circle where it gave much more side cover at that point. The Cleaners had a sentry of some kind here that would be available to be placed down. Currently, it's rumored that that could be returning in a near future season, so maybe season 2 or 3 as a faction item, but you of course know that you have either the Firebomb or Incinerator drone as of the current iteration. The Outcasts had the ability of what is currently to date the El Remedio, but it also seems like based off of some gameplay from the worldwide reveal trailer that it also had a lethal effect to enemies, where it seemed like it killed off enemies that stepped into that sort of radius of the El Remedio, where it healed friendlies but damaged enemies. So an interesting deviation there. And then in terms of ultimates, the Echelon sonar goggles actually did not grant a one-shot 5.7 pistol in their earliest iterations. It just offered that X-ray vision, but whatever weapon you had in hand was all you'd end up having available to use during that. As for gameplay changes, elements, and some unreleased stuff, the headshot and hitmarker icons were different in this earliest form of XDefiant's playable build. We saw some either unreleased or cut content in terms of maps in some of these earliest forms as well, with the map Air and Space being taken from the Division 2, where that looked to be a more close quarters map as well. And you also had something that was called Bitter Creek, which was a sort of area surrounding a church. My curiosity wonders if that would be something from Bitter Stream from the Far Cry series, but both of these were visible in some of those early marketing materials. Bitter Creek being a part of some of those gameplay trailers, and Air and Space actually having its own dedicated map fly-through segment of promotional material alongside Emporium. Speaking of which, Emporium actually seemed to be much more snow-covered in its exterior than what we have right now, so a slight change there as well. As for the HUD, we saw some differences in some of those elements. The Echelon position revealed was different compared to what it is now. There's different kill types like Demolisher or what would be Assist in a punk rock aesthetic as listed when they would pop up, and a few other changes that again just come down to those different thematic changes from what we saw from the earliest builds to where we are now. Game modes, it appeared we had a cyber attack style mode, which honestly very well could be that bomb mode that is coming later on down the line, because we've heard that this is going to be coming a one life mode, and it seemed like this was something that was a one life style or oriented mode where you had to hack or defend data terminals, something that looks like what was showcased. So this might actually be something that is, while not released right now, could have been something that was previewed all the way back from the initial concepts of XDefiant. Then that hotshot mode, what we have currently, it used rings instead of its current sort of token system. But the biggest difference here for that was that when you were the highest holder here of this, or the hotshot as you are today, you didn't get additional gameplay effects in terms of like movement or anything like that. So it was just simply who could collect and hold the most tags for your team and get those bonuses based off of collecting and killing. That was something that, again, in terms of gameplay wise, was a little bit different. But that's some changes here out of the alpha and earliest versions of XDefiant all the way back from 2021 compared to where we are now. So that said, like we talked about, if you guys want to see more, I'd absolutely love to dig further into this, maybe reach out to some devs and see if they have any insight they could share, or maybe even some gameplay that they'd be willing to share if Ubisoft could clear that kind of stuff. I know a lot of publishers are not really too keen on sharing pre-release stuff like that, so we'll see if we can do anything in regards to follow-ups if you'd like to see more. But let me know your thoughts down below. Is there any particular change made from 2021 to where we are now that you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy to consider? Or is it something that you're not really too interested in these kind of changes, don't care all that much? Whatever the case, let me know your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it idle and insightful, do me a favor, drop a like on it. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for more XDefiant and other FPS coverage. As we talked about a couple of times already in the past week, we're now in August, which is Black Ops 6 reveal month. So a lot of stuff upcoming, not only for XDefiant and some other cool stuff here on the horizon, but also for some big reveals later on in the month. I'd love to have in the community if you want to be a part of any of that. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.